Zelda, Symphony of the Goddesses is an ongoing tour that continues to perform new orchestral arrangements of Legend of Zelda music as well as old favorites. This CD, which was sold with every copy of Skyward Sword, represents the beginning ages of this now famous and popular concert. It was cool of Nintendo to release a 40-minute plus CD of orchestrated music from the series. It goes down as one of their coolest bonuses by far. Believe it or not, though, there are people who don't like the concert, and especially this CD. Who are they, and how can they hate it so? Seems to me a lot of the complaints thrown the series' way is that the music is too boisterous, loud, proud, but stale. Composer Koji Kondo's subtler melodies are made into heavy, sluggish, bombastic fireworks, sacrificing some of the series' melodic and calm tone for spectacle, desperate to get a rush out of you. Hey, I'm just the messenger here, don't shoot me. I took their opinions into account when listening to this CD once more, and after heavy consideration, I can only conclude that they have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, hey, if you don't like it, you don't like it, but I don't think the CD is too bombastic. I remember when I first got the CD in my hands, I was actually worried that every track would be a variation of the main theme over and over again, only louder. And it does play a lot in several different pieces. It is a musical unifier of all the titles, after all. Case in point of it overstaying its welcome is by the 7th track, which I actually like, but if you're listening to this all the way through, it will come off insistent and very heavy-handed. Thing is, I see people's point, and it would be nice to have slower, calmer tunes from the series played at the concert. That said, I've seen this soundtrack's fair share of detractors who practically rip it to shreds and claim that the concert is an insult to Kondo's and Nintendo's work. These complaints really piss me off. While the CD leans a bit heavily on the exhilaration side, there's still a good amount of steadier-paced music to be had here. Sometimes it's even within that very same piece that people complain to be too energetic and self-indulgent. The orchestrated Gerudo Valley might seem to be a terrible departure from its Spanish guitar roots for some, but it's still the same song, and the suspenseful twist it's given is actually a stroke of genius. There's strife in Gerudo Valley, so to exaggerate that into something more intense complements the original piece it's based on as something just as worrisome but restrained. So no, this newer revised version of Gerudo Valley is not a big middle finger to the original. It is actually just a creative spin on a much loved piece. That's all it is. Of all the pieces that get the most flack, even among people who love the CD, is the Twilight Princess movement. But I actually think it's the best piece on the CD, even somehow trumping the Wind Waker movement, and that's music from my favorite Zelda title. A lot of people who listen to this piece don't really find anything that moves them, and I can kind of see where they're coming from, but then again I can't, as there are some beautiful melodies to be found within it. It's sometimes a little musky and foreboding, which probably doesn't make it sound like too enjoyable of an experience until you realize where the piece is coming from. The video game Twilight Princess is a blend of Western meets fantasy, and the movement reflects that in its entirety brilliantly. It does it so well, in fact, that you can hardly tell the two apart. They kind of miraculously merge together by its end. It's awesome. You have a choral at the start of the piece that half reminds me of the chorus from Prince Igor. It's so satisfying to hear the chorus delve into a darker, mysterious lyricism. There's a concern in it, further exemplified by the bell that'll remind anyone of an upcoming showdown in a Western. The anxiety that's manifested within it begins to make the music dwell and sulk. At this point, it's all very down home at the prairie and very Western. But again, there are a lot of little touches of both fantasy and Western that they become interchangeable. Of course, just because it has this quality doesn't make it an automatic great piece. It has to be good, and it is. Most music for Westerns has a simplicity to it that otherwise touch on a lot of poignant human emotions that instantly help the listener to relate to the sense of villainy and hopelessness that permeates the landscape. This movement captures that, all culminating into a heroic and victorious celebration that makes you feel good, even if the sign-off feels a bit hokey at the end. But between all the galloping rhythms and foreshadowing choruses, you get a piece that ultimately feels special and might make you feel differently about the abundance of Western movies made back in the day. It's enough to make you feel sentimental. By the way, there is a gorgeously warm and coy motif right in the middle of this movement that just gets me every single time. If any moment makes me feel sentimental in this piece, it's that one. I can't sing this movement enough praises, so should we just move on? Okay, let's move on. The Wind Waker movement paints a narrative that's easy to grasp and understand, even if you've never played the game. The play on the main Zelda theme and how it's integrated into the seafaring theme has always been one of my favorite touches in Zelda music. It starts with that steady rhythm accentuated by the lower strings and has to be one of the best sound imitations of a boat traversing through water that I've ever heard. It's just nauseous enough to put you on the tip of seasickness. The piece kind of dives a bit by the time you get around to a serious march, likely portraying the showdown with Ganon, but this is only because the first half of the piece is so much stronger. Still, the music to Outset Island at the beginning is so sweet and cute. I think it might be the only piece of music I'll ever describe as cute. The trot-like pace of the violin and flute aid in this, but it's given a more genuine regard when that syrupy, foggy bassoon comes in to settle things. I freaking love it. Of course, the goofy and scrappy theme of the pirates is like a meteor. It's here, and as soon as it turns into something prouder, it's gone. Really, this movement gets to be more of a tease as you want to hear more, but then it goes on to the next tune. Kakariko Village has a genuine sadness to it. You wouldn't think that. The piece sounds like a jolly ballad at first, but it's the turn of tone into something mopey that gets me. To clarify, it's not the sad part of the piece that gets me, it's the turn itself. When the first theme concludes, we get a high-pitched and bright crescendo, only for it to fall gently like a leaf. It's as if you've just left a happy courting and entered into a soul mourning at a grave. It's effective. I also want to talk about the opening piece here because I feel like there's some confusion that surrounds it now. This is the medley that was created for the 25th anniversary Symphony, but there's another piece that goes by the same name, which was debuted first back in Nintendo's awesome opening for E3 2011. I don't know which piece the concert plays nowadays. I haven't been to a Symphony of the Goddess performance yet. Ain't no one dressing as Tingle Down and Be More, but the simplest way to differentiate the two is that one is shorter than the other by half the time. The concert tour seems to play the shorter version most often. It seems to have become a more appropriate fanfare piece than the longer one we have here on this disc. Anyway, the reason I mention all this is because I just wanted to express how relieved I am that the longer medley is at least immortalized on this disc, as it might be the best of all the Zelda medleys I've heard, and that's saying something, considering the staggering amount of arrangements that there are that tie in a lot of Zelda tunes. And that may be surprising to hear, because if you listen to it, you might think, well, this is standard Zelda fare. Not bad, but not great. And I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. I think anyone who follows video game music arrangements is aware of just how old Zelda is in terms of its music history. I mean, it was one of the first video game pieces to ever be arranged for orchestra, and to this day, it, along with Dragon Quest and Super Mario, are the only tunes that have lasted in the orchestral sphere since the orchestral game concert days to be consistently experimented with and performed in other popular concerts. So when you hear orchestrated Zelda music, the performance and arrangement better be good, otherwise it's just going to blur in with the rest. I can say for sure that this opening piece, as forgotten as it might be, doesn't blur. It's got a lot more adrenaline in it than most other arrangements, allowing the music to brim before it satisfyingly crackles and bursts into something triumphant. It's oddly kind of tough to tell some of the melodies apart and pinpoint which game they come from, but my favorite part is the segue from Wind Waker into the Awakening's overworld theme. I don't know, I just really like Wind Waker's music. Something about the Spanish dance flair that the castanets lend it give it a nice humor, only for it to be undercut beautifully by the serious violins that remind one of the long journey and grand stakes at play. Then they do it almost 2 more times. And it's still great. Part of the reason Zelda music remains so popular has most of all to do with the popularity of the games, but I don't think you need to have played them to enjoy this CD. I think from purely just a musical standpoint, the CD can get a little repetitious or heavy-handed, but there's more than enough clever play to keep you interested. Even when a certain theme or melody repeats, the orchestration is so good you sometimes might not even notice. Okay, so maybe that's a little far-fetched, but for the average listener, there's a lot to keep you stimulated. Again, a lot of it is very excited and loud, and the calm moments, while they're there, are kept brief. I'd complain about that if the louder, faster stuff wasn't so expertly arranged and is admittedly getting more out of relatively simpler, shorter pieces. That's not an affront to the original tunes, I'm just saying. Also, the movements to Wind Waker and Twilight Princess have a very similar structure to one another in terms of progression and narrative, making it highly likely that whichever one you listen to first will be your favorite, but they're both good, if not a little redundant in relation to each other. Still, everything that the Symphony of the Goddesses manages to accomplish is pretty astounding, and so long as the music doesn't tire you out before it tires of you, you're going to have a fun time. It's not a rare CD. You can get it separately from just about any website that sells stuff. I'm giving it 4 stars out of 5, and my MVP pick is the Twilight Princess movement.